What's up, guys? We had a 4-1 day yesterday, sweeping the basketball board. 4-0. I'm on a 7-0 basketball run, although lost in hockey and 0-3 hockey run. On an 0-3 hockey run. I think the LA Kings play yesterday, it looked worse than it was. They won like every stat category in that game that matters. So they had face-off percentage, number of hits, number of shots on goal. They had all of it. It was just Binnington was in net for the Blues, and I think he had, what did he have, like 40 saves in the game or something? I don't know. He played out of his mind, though. So that was just kind of the difference there. I think other than that, I think LA outplayed St. Louis in that one, and that one just didn't get there, but all the basketball ones did. Wake Forest had a pretty focused, motivated effort there, which was good. Cincinnati, that one went well. Like I said, Kansas, I think Kansas is just trying to get healthy and get ready for the NCAAB tournament. These big conference games, big conference tournaments, I should say, sometimes it does not matter as much to some of these bigger teams, and they know they're in, and it's not really going to affect their seed line that much. It doesn't really matter as much. They want to get ready for the tournament, which might have an impact on one of my plays today as well. And then what were the other plays? I don't even remember. I had some NBA. What did I have in the NBA? I don't even remember. Chicago Bulls. That was good. They won outright. And then, the Detroit Pistons somehow were lined as a favorite, but it was a decent spot for them. They had a lead early, lost the lead, and then regained the lead and were able to finish off that game with a win. So Detroit Pistons, some of that Pistons magic for me. Although when I was playing them constantly last year, they were like always an underdog and winning outright, but they went outright as a favorite for me this time. So hell yeah. College basketball today, there are a bunch of games. Obviously, I mean, this is conference tournament time. There are a lot of these games with like bubble implications, or the games that people are going to have most of their attention on, probably like Seton Hall, St. John's. That game is at Madison Square Garden, the Big East. So St. John's basically gets to play that tournament in a semi-home environment. Neither of those teams have played yet in the tournament. Seton Hall, I think their NCAA tournament status is better than St. John's. I think Seton Hall is more definitively in, even though the metrics don't think that they're as good. As you can see here, St. John's lined as a 4-point favorite because not only are they ranked as the better team in like KenPom and whatever, they also have a semi-home game in this one. So if I had to pick a lean there, it would be sort of to the St. John's side there, because I think they need this game more than Seton Hall does. But does that mean that they're going to crack under some pressure? I don't know. Seton Hall has beaten St. John's twice. They swept the season series against them, I believe, as well. So I think Seton Hall definitely needs that game less than St. John's does, although both teams are being kind of talked about as bubble teams. I just think that Seton Hall has enough wins against big teams that they're not going to be left out of the tournament anyway, because they beat Marquette and UConn and Creighton, I think. So they're going to, or did they beat Creighton? No, they did not. They lost both. Never mind. So they did beat Marquette and UConn, though. So I think they're probably safe, but we'll see about that. Ohio State, Iowa is an interesting one in the Big Ten, with both of those teams needing wins in the tournament to try to play their way into the tournament, or into the tournament discussion at least. So I think Iowa's the team that's kind of being discussed as being just outside of the tournament field in the bracketology and whatever. It feels like nobody is really talking about Ohio State, but Ohio State's picked up all this momentum since they fired their coach. So I actually kind of lean Ohio State in that one. Ohio State is the better of the two defensive teams in that one. And Ohio State, I believe, is actually the favorite in that game. So it seems like Iowa's the team people are tending to discuss more, and like the better offensive team, the more flashy offense. So I think the public, I think, is going to potentially come in on the Ohio State side in that one. Can't see the percentages there, but I kind of lean, on the Iowa side, but I kind of lean the other way there and I lean to Ohio State there a little bit. And then Utah, Colorado is also a pretty big one. Utah did get a game under their belt last night, and they were able to win, I think, in blowout fashion. I think they won easily against an Arizona State team that's just really kind of struggling. So Colorado hasn't played yet in this tournament, so that's maybe a little bit of an advantage for Utah in that respect. But Colorado's moved up from 2.5 to 3.5 as a favorite. And I would kind of only lean to the Colorado side in that one. I just think they're the better team. Utah's really been struggling. Both of those teams are considered to be teams that are kind of on the bubble as well. So those teams both need wins. So I think in a situation like that, the better team kind of is going to come out on top, which I also think is the case with Ohio State. I just kind of think they're a little bit better than Iowa is. But yeah, then I also think that the better team in that matchup there is Colorado slightly, and they're lined that way. Of course, they're lined as a favorite in that one. Then what do we got here? I think that is that it for the like games with real like bubble implications. I don't know if there are any more. Like those are kind of the big ones where there are bubble teams, potential bubble team. Oh, Wake Forest, of course, against Pittsburgh. So Wake won for me yesterday. They've dropped from a 2-point favorite to a 1.5-point favorite. So the line looks like it's moving against them. Unfortunately, even though I think Wake Forest, I like Wake Forest, like metrics wise, I think they're the better team. In the metrics, KenPom has them as being the better team by almost 20 ranking spots. But this just seems like a spot, even though Wake Forest has played in the tournament, so they got a game under their belt yesterday, and Pittsburgh does not. So all that would have you kind of want to Wake Forest because they're the better team metrics-wise, and they're both pretty balanced teams, decent on offense and defense. Just Wake is a little bit better. But Pittsburgh does play the slower pace. So I think that might hurt Wake a little bit if Pittsburgh's able to win out pace-wise. The slower team tends to be the team that is able to win out more often in a tournament environment when the teams are kind of like somewhat evenly matched like this. So I don't know. My lean would kind of be to Pittsburgh, but I kind of want to see Wake Forest do it because they're ranked 23rd in KenPom and ranked high enough that it's like they kind of should be a tournament team, really. So we'll see what happens there, but that's another one where if one of those teams wants to get into the tournament, they're going to have to win that game, obviously. The team that wins that game is going to wind up facing North Carolina and may even have to beat North Carolina. I don't know. Wake, I think, is a little bit more secure than Pitt. Well, I don't think neither of them are secure at all, but I think Wake Forest is closer to having a tournament bid than Pittsburgh is. But both of those teams should be motivated because I think they know that they have to win that game. Moving to my actual plays, my favorite play on the board. Both of these plays are similar in a little bit of a way, and kind of both of these. I can't even speak when it's this early in the morning. Both of these games are similar in a way, I would say. But I'm going to be on Villanova. I'm going to take the points here, 4.5 or something. KenPom has this line kind of about where it should be, about where it is. I mean, even though Marquette has moved up from a 3-point favorite to a 4.5-point favorite, it looks like. But I like the spot for Villanova for a whole lot of reasons here. Tyler Kolek is still going to be out, I believe, for Marquette. So it seems like he might be able to play. If they advance here, he might be able to play in the next game. But this might be a situation a little bit similar to Kansas yesterday, where it's like Marquette is already secure in their tournament berth. It's just kind of a matter of, are they going to get a 2-seed or a 3-seed? But does that matter that much? Like, I think they might be focused on trying to get healthy for the actual tournament, not care as much about the difference between a 2 and a 3 seed. Whereas they're playing against a team like I played Cincinnati last night. Cincinnati's trying to play their way into the tournament. Villanova here, they're trying to play their way into the tournament. They are one of the teams that's right there on the bubble. And I think if they win this game, they might be in the field if they get a win over a ranked Marquette team here. So this game means a lot more to Villanova than it does to Marquette, and Villanova's getting points here. So that aspect of it, I think the motivation lies more on the Villanova side. I also like the fact that Villanova plays an ugly, slow game, so it means that the public doesn't really want anything to do with them. So you kind of get some line value because of that way, but it's also better in like a tournament environment. You have Villanova that plays the slower pace, and they might be able to slow the pace down and ugly this game up too, and kind of frustrate Marquette, who wants to play significantly faster than Villanova does. And Villanova has the better defense slightly, and they're getting points. So I like Villanova for all those reasons. Getting points with the better defense, sign me up for that. And the more motivated team, sign me up for all that. And Villanova played yesterday, so that's the other component of this handicap. Villanova already has a tournament game under their belt in the Big East tournament, so that any nervousness that they might have had in that first game, that's out of the way. And what did they do yesterday in that game? They almost lost to DePaul, who was the worst team in the Big East by far. Villanova was a 24-point favorite in that game, and they had to win the game on a game-winning shot in the final, seconds of the game, basically. I think they won in the final, 10 seconds of the game. They were losing by 1 point or something, and they hit a shot to go back ahead to win towards the end. I forget what the score. Yeah, I think they were losing, and they hit a shot to take the lead and win, and they had to have one more defensive possession where I think DePaul had a chance to win or tie at the end and fell short there at the end, so they still had a final possession there. So way too close of a call for Villanova there. I think that's going to refocus Villanova. I mean, you do not expect Villanova to be an unfocused team coming into a tournament like this, where Villanova, they're actually heavily underrated, I think, because KenPom has them the 35th best team and has them as the 14th best defense. Pretty good team, and better than what you would think based on their pretty ugly looking record and based on the ugly way that they play. So they just have continued to kind of be an undervalued team. And then looking at what they did yesterday, nobody's going to want any part of them, but I like it here. Marquette, they have not been as good without Kolek. They're 1-2 without him. But of course, you might say, well, those two losses were to UConn and Creighton, I believe. So they were to the two other best teams in the Big East. Yeah, that's true. And they beat Xavier without Kolek, but Xavier's a significant step down from those other two teams. Villanova is not as good as UConn and Creighton, of course, but they are better than Xavier is. And the other difference is that UConn, Creighton, and Villanova all play much slower pace games than Xavier does. Xavier plays faster significantly than all three of those other teams. So Villanova might be a little bit more similar to the Creighton and UConn style there, even though they're not quite as good a team. They're certainly better than Xavier. So Marquette, we don't really know exactly how good they even are without Kolek. I mean, he is still their best player. So we'll see what happens there. But Villanova, for all the reasons that I just said, I think they're going to be heavily focused after suffering a ridiculous scare yesterday in a game that they should have had no issue with at all, which I think is also going to give us value on them because they look so bad against a horrific DePaul team. And they just have the motivation here because they really, really need to get this game to play their way into the tournament. And you might say that's going to put pressure on them. Yeah, but it means you're going to get a really motivated team and they're getting points. So Villanova plus the 4.5. Then the other game I'm going to be on is going to the MAAC, where it's similar in a way. The play is going to be on Niagara, and I'm going against the power ratings guys here because the power ratings guys have Marist as the better team to the point where they have them as a 2 or 3 point favorite here, which is still kind of in line with pick the winner, sort of. But if you look at what the market is doing, the odds makers are not idiots, man. And they're looking at the power ratings guys too, and they know what the power ratings guys have. So I mean, you don't want to blindly play just with the power ratings, especially because there could be injuries and stuff that the power ratings guys aren't really a thing like KenPom might not be totally factoring in the injuries and stuff. But so the odds makers know about all that, but you don't want to just blindly follow the power ratings. Although I do like to use the power ratings as a check. But in this case, I'm just going to roll with the situational handicap here. And it's in a situation kind of just to win the game. That is going to be a play on Niagara. They're up from what looks like they were a 1.5 point underdog at some point. So some books look like they did open around the Marist 2, but it's flipped to Niagara being a favorite of 1, which still, when it's in that 1.5 to 1 range, I don't think it really matters that much because you're still just kind of playing to pick the winner here. I like Niagara here. There are some things that are similar to the Villanova game in this game here. Although I should say that, yes, the power ratings guys do have Marist as the better team. They do have Marist as the way better defensive team, but they also have them as a really bad offense. So they're a very imbalanced team where even though Niagara is bad, they're at least balanced in that badness. Let's say KenPom has them ranked somewhere in the 200s in both offense and defense. And he has them as a bit of a faster team than Marist a little bit. Neither of these teams are fast, but Marist is much, much slower. Marist plays defense really well. He actually has them in the top 100 in defensive efficiency, and they're probably the only team in this conference that is ranked that well defensively. And normally, yes, I do like the better defense, but Marist's offense is very, very, very ugly. They really struggle to put things together on the offensive side. So I don't like that imbalance. 321st in KenPom in offense, which is a lot worse than Niagara is offensively, even though Niagara's a lot worse defensively, but still. In a tournament environment like this, the offense does matter as well. You don't just want to blindly play a team that has a great defense if their offense is really, really horrific. But the thing that I like about this, similar to Villanova yesterday, is that Niagara had a scare. They played a game in this tournament already, and they were a double-digit favorite, 10.5-point favorite, and they were losing for kind of a majority of that game. Even though they actually shot a pretty good percentage from the floor, they were losing to the worst team in this conference, or the team that at least finished last in the conference, Siena, who only had 4 wins on the season, 3 of them in conference, yes, but there's no way that Niagara should have struggled like that in that game, and they did, and they almost lost the game to Siena. Like, that's kind of embarrassing. Like, maybe Niagara was a little bit nervous coming into the tournament, whatever the case may have been. I think that's going to cause them to refocus, just like with Villanova. When you were a team that was a big favorite and you should have won that game more easily than you did, and you had a big scare, I think that refocuses you coming into the next game. And as if Niagara needed to have any reason to be more focused, they also did lose their final regular season game at Marist, but they only lost that game by 1. And if you look at that game, Marist actually outshot Niagara in that game, but I don't expect Marist to be shooting 48% from the field again. And even though Marist did shoot that well in that game, Niagara, yeah, I mean, you might say this is an outlier that Niagara shot 50% from 3. That's true, but we do know that Niagara is the better shooting team. So, yes, it's an outlier, but I don't expect Niagara to not shoot better than Marist in this game. I do expect them to be the better shooting team because they are. But if you look at that game, Niagara had the lead like all game. They were winning by almost double digits throughout the middle of the game. They held the lead throughout almost the whole game and then wound up falling short just at the end. So Niagara actually kind of outplayed Marist in that entire game. So that kind of tells me something, that I'm not totally convinced that Marist is really actually the better team here. Niagara did beat them at home this year. So they split home and home, but Niagara won by 5 on their own floor, and they only lost to Marist by 1 in that game that I just mentioned, where Niagara was actually winning the whole game. Although, yes, they were helped out by a kind of an outlier 3-point shooting performance. That's true. But I like Niagara here because they do have that tournament game under their belt already. Marist does not. So Marist has not played since the end of the regular season. They've had 5 days off. And in that last regular season game, they beat Niagara in that game. So they came out of there with the win. So in their most recent game, they beat this Niagara team. So that kind of means that maybe Niagara is going to be the team that has more things to adjust here. So Marist is coming into this game having not played for 5 days, not played yet in this tournament. So they might have a little bit of like the opening like jitters factor, which also applies to Marquette in my Villanova play. Neither of these teams have played yet in this tournament, whereas Villanova and Niagara both already played a game in their conference tournaments and were big favorites and suffered like a pretty bad scare. So those are the 2 plays there. So it's going to be Villanova plus 4.5 and Niagara, I believe, -1. And then we're going to go to the NBA, where I have 1 play and 1 kind of lean, where I was kind of considering almost wanting to play against the Houston Rockets, who are down from 8 to 7.5 with 84% of the tickets on them, but 77% of the cash over on the other side on the Wizards. So I do like the way that cash discrepancy looks. I think Houston is not in a good spot, but I don't know if it's quite strong enough for me to want to do this. Houston is returning home from a road trip that took them out to the Pacific Coast, but it was only a 3-game road trip. They won all 3 games, but 2 of them were against Portland and San Antonio, so who really cares about that? They had a nice win against Sacramento in the middle there, but the 3rd game on the road trip, they had already returned to the state of Texas and played at San Antonio, like I said. So would that be kind of considered to be the return home spot? Because really San Antonio is not that far from Houston. So was Houston already kind of in that return home distraction spot in that game against San Antonio? I don't know. I think they were in at least kind of a letdown spot coming off a big win over Sacramento. And Houston was the favorite in that San Antonio game. And San Antonio played them pretty tough and wound up covering the game in the end. So Houston barely got out of there with the win. So I don't know if I would consider this to be a return home spot or not, but I still don't think Houston's going to be completely focused on a Washington team either. So they still might have some of those return home distractions in this game. They're playing a team that they probably won't be focused on, a bad team in Washington. But Houston did just play a pretty poor game against San Antonio. So is that going to cause them to focus at all? I don't really know, because they do have Cleveland up next, which is a bigger opponent than Washington is. So it is still possible they overlook Washington. They're laying a lot of points to Washington, and Washington just had a really ugly game where they went into – Washington was coming off a big win over the Heat, so they were in a letdown spot. They went to Miami – or excuse me, they won in Miami, big win. And then in the letdown spot, they went into Memphis. Memphis without Ja and whatever. Memphis has just been one of the worst teams in the league. They've been playing awful. And Washington was actually favored on the road in that game against Memphis, and Memphis still just destroyed them. Memphis had a huge lead basically all game, wrecked them, wound up winning by double digits, so that's probably pretty embarrassing. So I think Washington is probably going to return to focus in this game against the Houston Rockets, so I do lean to Washington there. Don't know if it's a game I should actually play, although I don't know, it's tough. I'm kind of considering it. It's a game I am considering. But the game that I actually like more is actually the Philadelphia 76ers plus the points. But it looks like they have 76% of the tickets and 61% of the cash on. So I don't like that. That it looks like they're the public road underdog here and have less of the cash in the tickets. So the market seems to be indicating against it in that way, which that doesn't make sense to me because I don't see how the public would be on the Philadelphia 76ers here. Maybe they look at this line and think that the line is too big and that this might be a more competitive game. But the 76ers, everybody, I think, knows at this point. Anybody that's involved in betting knows that Joel Embiid has been out for a while now. And the 76ers have just been awful without Embiid. So the Bucks are like clearly the better team in the situation these teams are both in, right? Like, so I would have kind of expected the Bucks would be more public than what this is showing here. Like the percentages don't really bear out what I think the public would actually kind of think about this game. So we'll see about that. But I really think this is a bad spot for Milwaukee. They're returning home. They are returning home from a 4-game road trip that took them to the Pacific Coast, and all 4 of those games are on the Pacific Coast, and they only went 1-3. Yes. And they did have a really bad game in their last game where I went against the Bucks because they had just beaten the LA Clippers. They played a tough game against the Lakers the game before that. They got blown out to start the road trip against Golden State. Played real tough against LeBron and the Lakers. Then they won the next game staying in LA against the Clippers. Huge win. And then came out of that and had a real bad performance against Sacramento, where I was on Sacramento in that game because I thought it was a bad spot for Milwaukee. But now Milwaukee's returning home, and they get this Philadelphia team without Joel Embiid. And Milwaukee has Phoenix and Boston up in their next 2 games. And the last time they played Philadelphia wasn't long ago. It was on February 25th, so less than a month ago. And they blasted Philadelphia in Philly by 21 points. So it's possible that Milwaukee actually overlooks this Philadelphia team here. And they have the return home distraction spot coming into play here where I would think that the public bettors might look and think, well, Milwaukee's obviously the better team here. If 76ers are without Embiid, Milwaukee just had a pretty ugly loss. They're going to bounce back now that they're back at home, right? That would, I think, be kind of what the public would think here in this game, knowing that Milwaukee's actually a good team and not putting that much stock into that loss, whereas the 76ers, I don't think they're going to want anything to do with the 76ers, but I think Milwaukee's going to be in a distraction spot here because the last time they played Philly, they handled them so easily. They know that Philly is without Embiid, so they might not pay that much attention to a Philly team that's been playing real bad without him. And like I said, the return home spot with only 1 day off, that's got to lend itself to being a pretty big distraction spot. Whereas Philadelphia, I mean, you talk about Milwaukee not having a good game in their last game. That's true. Milwaukee had a pretty bad game in the last game. Philadelphia's was a lot worse, dude. Philadelphia played 2 games in a row at New York, and they somehow won the first game despite scoring only 79 points. Then I actually went against Philadelphia, so I've been kind of keying on these teams here. I actually won both of these games in these teams' previous 2 games. I actually won on both games. I played the Knicks against the Sixers, and I played Sacramento against the Bucks. So I actually played against both of these teams in their prior game. But Philadelphia got absolutely wiped out. So they had beaten the Knicks the game before that, but they only scored 79 points in the game, and then they only scored 79 again, but this time lost 106-79. So they lost by almost 30 points in that game. A 27-point loss and only scoring 79 points in 2 straight games. That's really embarrassing, dude. Nobody's going to want the Philadelphia 76ers here, but I think they're going to be focused coming into Milwaukee, a Milwaukee team that came into their house the last time they played them and embarrassed them on their own floor. They don't have anything up next, really, with Charlotte being their next game when they return home. Philadelphia's going to want to try to split this road trip here. I think we're going to see a more focused Philadelphia team here than we will see out of Milwaukee here coming in, returning home from the Pacific Coast, whereas Philly is just traveling from New York to Milwaukee. And I think Philadelphia is going to be in the more embarrassed spot here off of a horrific loss where they scored so few points against the New York Knicks. So the Knicks are a good defensive team. I mean, say what you will about them otherwise. I think Milwaukee's game is more acceptable, their previous game, because the Kings are pretty good, and that was definitely a bad spot for Milwaukee, but it was a bad spot for both of these teams in a way. I would say it was the zigzag with Philadelphia, and in that game against the Knicks, one of the main reasons I played on the Knicks in that game was that was the return for Maxey, so Philadelphia had to bring Maxey back into the mix there, and their offense did not get it together, but now he's back in the lineup, so I think they have that game under their belt now where they brought him back in. They had a bad game with him the first game. So I think that's going to not only refocus them because they played so badly in that game, but now they have that game under their belt with Maxey back in the lineup. So now they're kind of more used to having him back. They have that one game out of the way with him back. So I think that's going to help their offense be more successful here now because they have him back. So they're now used to having him back a little bit because they have one game with him back already. So they're going to be more adjusted to having him back in the lineup now. So I like all that. This is the second game back now, whereas the previous game was the reverse injured player theory spot. Now this spot is going to be the second game back, which tends to be a more positive spot. If the team played really bad in that first game where that player came back in the reverse injured player theory spot, that team tends to play a much better game in the next game. So I think that is the case with Philadelphia here. So all that leads me to being on the Philadelphia 76ers plus the points in this one, 8.5. This is what you can get right now. A pretty big number, a decent sized number there in a spot that I don't think is very good for Milwaukee. So Philadelphia 76ers will be the play in that one. And then going to hockey, big hockey card, but there's only going to be one game that I really like that much in hockey, even though we do have a couple of spots where I think there are teams returning home from road trips and whatever. The Detroit Red Wings, I think, are returning home from a road trip, but I really don't know if I want to play on Arizona again. Detroit has just been awful. They just got wrecked on a road trip. They lost all 4 games on the road trip. Their last game of the road trip, they at least kind of came back close to home. So I don't know if you would consider that to already kind of be the return home spot, maybe, because they were back in Buffalo after they played out west in the prior 3, but they got wrecked again in that Buffalo game. So I don't know if that means they're going to actually have a bounce back here or if it means they're going to still suffer the return home distraction spots here, since it is technically their first game back home. So that's kind of similar to that Houston Rockets spot where, although I think the playing against the Houston Rockets might be stronger than playing against the Detroit Red Wings here, because the Red Wings are just off such an embarrassing loss, 7-3 to the Sabres. So I don't know. It's not really a game I want to get involved in, but I do kind of still lean against the Detroit Red Wings there. And they've gone down from minus 180 to minus 154 on the money line. And they have the public ticket percentage. The cash percentage, I think, is kind of the cash percentage on pregame here, I don't think is that good of an indicator. So I don't know about that. I don't know what to think about that. But the team I'm playing against a decent sized favorite here in the Dallas Stars. I'm going to fade them. I think they're in a bad spot here, and I'm going to grab. They're actually up from minus 170 to minus 173. They're probably going to be public because they're the Dallas Stars. Everybody likes how Dallas plays hockey. They're a high scoring team. They're the type of team that people want to play on, really, because of the way that they can score. And people don't want anything to do with the New Jersey Devils. The Devils can score, too. This is probably going to be a pretty high-scoring game, to be honest. The total is sitting at 6.5, and it looks like it's ticking up a little bit. But both of these teams, I think, play a lot better on offense than defense, especially New Jersey. But New Jersey is one of the offenses in the league that can actually keep up with Dallas's ability to score. So I do like that, even though New Jersey gives up a lot of goals. They do have the ability on offense to score with Dallas. So I do like that aspect of it. But this is all going to be about the situation, man. Where, yeah, I think the public's going to be on Dallas. I don't really see how the percentages are going to bear out yet. But this is going to involve me jumping into New Jersey. You can get them at plus 150 on the money line right now. And it might even go up a little bit further than that. So we're going to play on a decent-sized underdog where you're not even saying that they're going to win the game necessarily at this point. You're just saying that you think they have a better shot to win the game than what this line is giving you, which I think is the case. So I think New Jersey's being undervalued here. You're probably only going to need them to be like a 45% shot to win this game. I think they have a decent shot in this game because Dallas, they did just return home from a road trip. So normally I would say if a team returned home from a road trip and didn't play that well, that they're in a better spot to bounce back in the next game. But I don't think that that's what we're looking at with Dallas here. So they returned home from the Pacific Coast. They won 3 games in a row on the Pacific Coast. a weird barn burner 7-6 against San Jose, where they actually had to go into overtime and shoot out 2 games in a row against San Jose. And that 7-6 game, that's crazy. I mean, Dallas giving up 6 goals to San Jose. I don't know what that's about. That was a crazy barn burner of a game. Then they put up 6 goals at Anaheim, but neither of those teams are good at all, really. And then won 4-1 at LA. So Dallas scoring a ton of goals here. A good road trip there, 3-0 road trip, beating 2 bad teams, though, and then beating LA. I mean, LA, that's a pretty good win. Then they return home, but of course, they weren't going to be distracted in that return home spot because they had Florida coming into their house. So obviously, Dallas was not unfocused in that game because Dallas came out and they had a 3-0 lead pretty late into the second period. They were up 3-0. It looked like, oh, this is going to be a big win for Dallas here. They wound up losing the game. They were up 3-0 late in the second period. They had a 3-1 lead after they gave up a power play goal going into the third period, and they still had a 3-1 lead in the final half of the third period. Gave up another power play goal in the last half of the third period. Then in the final 6 minutes of the game, they allowed a tying goal and then another power play goal in the same minute, almost right after that, and lost the game after being ahead of Florida, who's one of the best teams in the league and the team that was in the Stanley Cup Finals last year. Dallas had them completely on the ropes and were up 3-0 on them and wound up giving up 4 goals, 3 of them on the power play. That's just devastating. And wound up losing the game, a game they had in hand. It looked like they were going to get a huge win over Florida. How do you bounce back off of that, man? And they do have LA up next again, although they beat LA in LA the last time they played them. But that's still an opponent with a better record than this New Jersey team they have coming in. So I think Dallas is in a bad spot. That's going to be a hangover spot after putting up such a big effort, big performance. This might be the spot where the kind of the return home distractions really hit them because they were not distracted in that game back with Florida coming in. But now with New Jersey, not a very good team coming into their house, this team that has basically around like a 500 record hasn't been playing well. I think this might be the spot where Dallas isn't totally focused. And New Jersey, I think maybe they will, because New Jersey, they fired their coach pretty recently, which I went on New Jersey in the game right after they fired their coach, and they unfortunately did lose. They lost to LA in that game. So a good team, though, in LA. I think it was that game. So they haven't played well with their new coach. They're actually 1-4 with him. But look at the losses, man. The LA Kings, Florida, Carolina, and the New York Rangers. So can you blame them for any of those losses? Those are all really difficult opponents. So I do think the New Jersey, we're going to see them start playing better under this new coach. And maybe this is going to be a game where they're actually going to be able to do something here and show up focus here, because they don't have a big game up next in Arizona. This, of course, is a big game against Dallas. They're playing a high-flying offense, one of the better teams in hockey. They know Dallas is a good team, and they have 2 days off coming into this game. So they are having to go from the East Coast, from New York, out to Dallas. But they could consider this maybe to even be like a start of a road trip, even though technically the New York game was. Still, New York, New Jersey, I mean, is that really that much of a road game? Not exactly, even though it was at Madison Square Garden, sure. But New York, New Jersey, obviously very close geographically. But now they have 2 days off, which I think might help break that losing momentum a little bit, because you get an extra day off. You get to put those distractions aside, and now you get to go out to Dallas, which is kind of like starting a road trip here, going out on the road here. I think it's a good focus spot for New Jersey there, where they're going to be able to leave their home area there, forget about these losses they've had recently, focus on hockey here, whereas Dallas is in almost the complete opposite spot, where I think they're going to be in a spot where it lends itself to not having that much focus. So that's going to be the play there. On the New Jersey Devils, the Devils. Don't mess with the Devils. Well, the last time I said that, they wound up losing for me. I don't know why I keep winding up on the Devils. It just winds up being how the situation pans out, man. So those plays one more time today. Let's continue this run, man. I mean, the last 2 days have been pretty good. We need to recoup these losses here. We're getting kind of close to being back where we were at the start of the year. At least we got to at least get back there. I do not want to have a losing year for only the second time in 17 or 18 years. The only losing year was 2015. So come on, man. So these plays today, one more time. In college basketball, Niagara -1. These games are all going to be in the evening. So the games are all going to start playing around the same time. Niagara -1 and Villanova +4.5 in a late game tonight. Villanova played late last night too, I think. So they're playing night games the whole time. So Niagara -1, Villanova +4.5, NBA Philadelphia 76ers +8.5, and NHL New Jersey Devils +150. Have a good one, man. Peace.